Okay, so you want to rule Nigeria. You've got 220 million people, a coastline full of oil, farmland that stretches for hundreds of miles, and a population so young and so hungry that the average age is under 19. Sounds like the richest job on the continent, right? Here's the strange part. An estimated 31% of the population still lives in extreme poverty. The currency has been in free fall for years, and the government collects so little in taxes that it can barely pay its own bills. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how Nigeria actually makes its money, where most of it goes before it ever reaches the people, why the country keeps growing on paper while millions stay poor, and the one hidden revenue engine that almost nobody talks about when they discuss the Nigerian economy. That last one is the thing that changes how you see this entire country. Nigeria is not a poor country. Let's be clear about that up front. It has a lower middle income mixed economy with expanding manufacturing, financial, services, communications, technology, and entertainment sectors. It's ranked as the 52nd largest economy in the world by nominal GDP and the second largest in Africa by purchasing power parity. So the question was never, is there money in Nigeria? The question is always, where does it come from, who controls it, and why does so little of it reach the average person on the street? That's what we're actually going to break down today. Let's start with the piece everyone thinks they know: oil. Everyone who's ever heard of Nigeria has heard of Nigerian oil. It's been the country's calling card since the 1950s. And yes, oil is real, it's significant, and it does fund the government, but here's where it gets interesting. Although oil revenues contribute roughly 2/3 of government revenues, oil only contributes about 9% to the actual GDP. Read that again. The government runs on oil money, but the economy itself barely does. That gap right there is the source of almost every structural problem Nigeria has. You've built a government that's addicted to one commodity, while the actual economy underneath it has quietly been doing something completely different. Nigeria recorded an average daily crude oil production of 1.55 million barrels per day in Q1 of 2026, which is lower than the 1.62 million barrels recorded in the same period of 2025. And the reasons production keeps slipping are not a mystery. Continuing challenges within the petroleum industry include pipeline vandalism, crude theft, underinvestment in upstream infrastructure, and fluctuating global energy market conditions. So you've got a government that depends on oil for most of its budget, and the oil keeps leaking out of the ground before it gets to the budget. That is a genuinely difficult situation to govern around. Now here's what most people miss entirely. While everyone argues about oil, the real Nigerian economy has been quietly growing underneath it. The non-oil sector accounted for 96.08% of total GDP in Nigeria in Q1 of 2026. 96%. The sector everyone talks about contributes less than 4% of what the economy actually produces. So what's making up the other 96? Agriculture is the first big one, and it's more important than people give it credit for. Agriculture, which in the past was the biggest sector, now accounts for around 23% of GDP. That's still a massive share of a massive economy. Agriculture provides employment for approximately 35% of the population. Think about that for a second. More than 1 in 3 working Nigerians gets their income from farming, not from oil. Cassava, yam, sorghum, cocoa, palm oil. Nigeria is one of the world's largest producers of several of these crops. The problem is that most of this farming is still done at a subsistence level, meaning farmers grow just enough to feed their families with a little left over to sell. The agricultural sector suffers from extremely low productivity, reflecting reliance on antiquated methods. So you have a sector that employs a third of the country but operates far below its potential. If you're looking for where the biggest economic opportunity in Nigeria is hiding, agriculture is a serious candidate. But agriculture isn't the fastest growing part of the economy right now. That title belongs to services, and specifically to one subsector within services that has been quietly becoming one of the most important industries on the continent. The services sector maintained its dominance in the economy, growing by 4.31% in Q1 2026. In terms of contribution to aggregate GDP, the services sector accounted for 57.73% in Q1 2026. That's more than half the entire economy, and within services, the strongest gains were recorded in information and communication at 10.98%. Financial and insurance at 8.54%, and transportation and storage at 7.41%. Telecommunications is growing at nearly 11% in a country of 220 million people. That is not a small number. Nigeria's fintech sector, its mobile money platforms, its digital payment systems, these are not side projects. They are becoming foundational infrastructure for how the country does business. And this brings us to the hidden engine, the one that barely gets mentioned in the same breath as oil, but is arguably more important to the daily financial reality of Nigeria than any barrel of crude: remittances. In 2025 alone, remittance inflows to Nigeria reached an estimated $23 billion, the highest level recorded in 5 years. $23 billion sent home by Nigerians living abroad, flowing directly into households, communities, and local businesses across the country. This high volume represents approximately 6% to 8.4% of the nation's nominal GDP, consolidating remittances as the second largest stream of foreign currency behind petroleum receipts. The Nigerian diaspora, Nigerians living in the US, the UK, Canada, Germany, the Gulf, is functionally a second oil sector. Except this one doesn't get stolen from pipelines, doesn't require government management, and doesn't collapse when a single commodity price drops on the global market. Official remittances from Nigerians abroad hit $20.93 billion in 2024, which was 4 times the value of what the government received from oil transfers that same year. 4 times. And that's only the official number. The African Development Bank estimates that unofficial flows are about 50% of official remittances, meaning the real number could be significantly higher. This is money that bypasses government entirely. It goes straight from a Nigerian doctor in Houston to his mother in Ibadan, from a Nigerian engineer in London to her sister's school fees in Enugu. It is the most direct form of economic transfer that exists, and it is enormous. Now here's where the whole picture starts to connect. You have an economy with massive agricultural potential that's being underutilized. You have a services sector, especially telecoms and fintech, growing at double digits. You have a diaspora sending home more money than the government earns from oil. And then you have a government that is still almost entirely organized around capturing oil revenue and distributing it downward. Taxes are supposed to be a huge source of internally generated revenue, but multifaceted problems ranging from corruption, poor management, and poor leadership have directly and indirectly affected taxation. As a result, the government has been unable to finance major government projects. so the machine is broken at the collection point. The economy generates value, real value, across agriculture, services, remittances, manufacturing. But the government's ability to tax that value, invest it back into infrastructure, and turn it into compounding national wealth is severely limited. The fiscal deficit widened to 2.4% of GDP in 2025, reflecting higher spending pressures, including rising debt service costs, despite stronger revenue. There's one more piece to this that rounds the picture out, and it's the one that actually gives you reason to be optimistic rather than just frustrated. The World Bank upgraded Nigeria's 2026 growth estimate to 4.4%. S&P Global Ratings also upgraded Nigeria's long-term foreign and local currency credit ratings to B from B-. That's a credit upgrade. That means the outside world is starting to price Nigeria differently. The private Dangote refinery in Lekki is doing strong business and is on its way to becoming the largest refinery in the world, providing nearly 100,000 people with a comparatively good income and skilled work. That's a private sector actor doing what the government couldn't do with its state-owned refineries for decades. Within services, the strongest gains were in information and communication, financial and insurance, and transportation. Manufacturing also contributed positively, with oil refining surging 37.46% and cement production jumping 11.53%. So here's where we actually land. Nigeria's economy is not a simple oil story. It never really was. The non-oil economy accounts for over 96% of total real GDP. Agriculture, telecommunications, trade, construction, financial services, and manufacturing are the major drivers of economic activity. The diaspora sends home more foreign currency than oil delivers to the government. The services sector is more than half the economy and growing fast. The real challenge is not that Nigeria lacks economic activity. The real challenge is that the system built to govern it was designed for a world where one pipe in the ground paid for everything. That pipe is now less than 4% of the actual economy, and the government is still catching up to that reality. If you're Nigerian, or if you're watching this trying to understand how a country this large and this resource rich still struggles the way it does, the answer is structural. The money is there. It's moving. It's just moving through channels that the state was never built to capture. Tax or reinvest. That is the economics of ruling Nigeria. If this video made you think differently about how African economies actually work versus how they're described, drop a comment below. I want to know which part surprised you most. And if you want to go deeper, the next video on how Nigeria's government actually spends what it collects and where most of it disappears is right here. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because that one is even more revealing than this one.